she kind of had a bond with a lot of us that the other teachers didn't have. Would talk to us outside of class about keeping up on our stretches and motivating us in different ways. She ended up getting into a car accident and passed away tragically. A lot of us were really shaken, I think, because at that age you're not even thinking that something like that could happen. I was kind of blindsided by a guidance counselor asking me about it, and I was mad when she asked about it, honestly, because I was like, how did you know that happened to me?
So tell us about your relationship with your grandparents.
I have journals from her where she would write that I would tell her that she was my best friend, and we just were so close. And I felt the same with my grandpa too. So as he was getting into his mid to late 80s, he really started slowing down. A few months leading up to his passing, we kind of knew it was coming. During that time, my grandma started experiencing Alzheimer's, so she was mentally failing while he was physically. I kind of had to take care of her. It was nerve-wracking sometimes because it was a big responsibility to take care of this person. They were administering morphine, so we knew that night was going to be the night that it was happening. I combed his hair, made sure it looked right, even though he didn't look like himself when you're in heart failure. I still made sure he would have felt like he was being taken care of, and same thing with my grandma. As soon as I was in the hospital when she took her last breath, I just cry and think about them. I look at pictures of them. I think sometimes people are really avoidant of that, but I feel like I need that sometimes to just feel that connection. I had to learn just being open about what you're feeling, and that whatever you're feeling about the grief, you could feel angry or shocked or anything, and you're allowed to feel however it comes on to you, because your relationship with that person is only yours.
Welcome to the Mending Piece by Piece podcast, where we dive into the deeply personal journeys of grief, healing, and hope. Each week, we bring you heartfelt conversations with those who have experienced profound loss, offering insights, comfort, and a sense of community. Whether you're navigating your own grief or supporting someone else through theirs, this podcast is here to remind you that you're not alone. Thank you for joining us on this journey of mending piece by piece. Welcome to the Mending Piece by Piece podcast, where we talk about all things loss and explore the diverse and personal experiences of grief and the healing journeys that follow that. Today, we have a really amazing guest that I know that you will all love, Jessica, who's a 26-year-old who has faced multiple losses in her life and lost both her paternal grandparents as well as a dance teacher that she considered a close friend as well. And she has a unique perspective on grief, drawing from her yoga background, and has a growing understanding of how fragile life is. And I'm glad to have her here to share her story with you guys today. And also somebody who has experienced loss in their early 20s. I know how when you're mourning the loss of anyone in your early 20s, that could be really difficult because most people are out doing their thing, and here you are losing someone. So I'm really glad that you are here to open up and share with us, what it's been like for you. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Linda.
So I know how special the bond is with grandparents, but before we go there, I wanted just to have you talk about a little bit about yourself, share something, what you like, what you do, so people can get to know who you are.
Yes. Okay, so like you said, I'm 26. I still live at home with my parents, but I'm a full-time accountant at a nursing home. So that's what I do day to day, but I'm also a yoga teacher on the side. And as a dancer growing up, I've always loved movement and tuning into your body, and that's something I found in college. I got connected into yoga, so I loved the connection between dance and yoga that I found. And I'm the youngest of 5, so I'm experienced my grief with a big family, I'll say. So I had a lot of supporters with me as I went through it.
Yeah, well, that's good that you had that support, because it could go either way. You have a big family and people are off in their own corners. Okay. So did you start yoga in college? Is that what you said?
Yes, so I had taken a few classes as a teenager at my dance studio, actually. And when I was in college, I took yoga as an elective. It was an easy
Mm,
class that a lot of people took just to get a gen ed for a physical activity class, but I really fell in love with it. I had kind of fell off of dance after my senior year following the loss of my dance teacher, and I didn't really know another way to find movement and feel good in that way. I wasn't really comfortable going to the gym. I enjoyed classes where someone is kind of telling me what to do. I wasn't sort of a free range gym person. So when I started taking yoga, I found out that they had a teacher training program. So I never stopped my elective classes. I kept going with all the levels they had and
that's
got my
that's
cert.
cool.
Hmm.
So you got credit in college, but then you got this certificate and
Yes, from
you
Westchester University, which a lot of colleges don't have yoga programs that I know of. So I was lucky to find that.
yeah, that's amazing that you took advantage of that too.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about the yoga and the movement and what it does for you when you're stressed and you're, going through grief, because I do think that's really it's important, and that's what's unique about your story, how you're able to use that, and the awareness of how much it does help. So yeah. So you said about your dance teacher that you lost your dance teacher, and kind of like it sounds like it took you a little bit away from dance. Can you tell us about your dance teacher, about like that relationship, and then what
Yes.
had happened?
Hmm. Her name was Brittany Zarin. I'll share her name. She started being my dance teacher probably around fourth grade, which 10 years oldish, I'll say. And she was 10 years older at the time. So she was just kind of starting out as a dance teacher only in her first few years after graduating. And she was really like an older sister to a lot of the girls. She kind of had a bond with a lot of us that the other teachers didn't have, just because she was so close in age to us, and would talk to us outside of class about keeping up on our stretches and motivating us in different ways. So it was really nice to have that bond with her. And going into my senior year, the summer before, she ended up getting into a car accident and passed away tragically. So I obviously wasn't the only one who was affected by that at the studio. A lot of us were really shaken, I think, because at that age, you're not even thinking that something like that could happen. So it was really unexpected. And being in the environment where everyone is grieving differently, and the studio, I think it was a good thing. They really wanted to honor her, but hearing her talked about so often for me was really hard to constantly be brought back to that space of grief when dance was usually my outlet of not thinking about anything.
Yeah.
So that brought me out of it my senior year a bit.
So did you continue to dance your senior year or
I
no?
did, I did. And they actually brought in her sister to finish her classes, which was amazing that her sister was strong enough to finish because she was a choreographer also. So she stepped in and I finished out senior year. I actually got to do a solo that she had taught to me in previous years that I hadn't gotten to perform. And I was able to take that as my senior year. And I really felt connected to her every time I did that piece because it was one of the last creations I guess she had that wasn't shared, which I felt really special to be able to share that with
Yeah,
everyone.
that is really special.
Hmm.
And that's pretty amazing that you were able to do that, because I think some people would be like, that's too much. I can't, might have walked away and
Hmm.
not wanted to.
Hmm.
And so I heard you say that for you, they were doing a good job honoring her and talking about her, which I think you probably realize in our society that's not usually the case. But that was hard for you to keep it was there in your face. So how did you cope with that? How did you, because it was a sudden loss. It was, very like sudden, unexpected, very tragic. She was very young. This is a mentor, like a sister figure. And you were very young, where you're right. You're not thinking about death. Like, you're just not.
Yeah. I'll say because we were seniors at that point, me and a couple of the other girls that were close to her, we kind of had to be the strength of the studio, it felt. I don't necessarily think anyone put that pressure on us. Maybe it was put on by ourselves. But there were a lot of younger girls who really looked up to her, and I'm sure they understood even less what they had just gone through. So I think just trying to still be a leader there, which is what she would have wanted, finish out strong, and just try to keep her in mind in everything I was doing while I was there.
Okay. So that's what gave you the strength to keep going, to do it in her memory.
Yeah, just the memory of her.
Yeah,
really.
and to honor her. And that's mentoring these younger girls, maybe guys, I shouldn't have just said girls, sorry. But I'm curious, like, did any of them like talk to you about that, or it was strictly like you just did dance?
I would say they didn't talk about it when we were in that space, unless maybe I was tuning it out, honestly.
Yeah.
There were a lot of photos of her hung up, quotes that she had shared that she really liked that maybe were on her Instagram page, so they brought those and put them on the walls of the studio. So it was talked about in that way, but not maybe by the younger girls.
Okay. All right. And did you go to the funeral or the services?
Yes, a few of us that were very close with her did. So that was one of my first times seeing something like that, also because it was an open casket funeral.
Okay.
So yeah, it was really interesting to see how different people process that also, because I had maybe mentioned to you before, I can mention when we talk about my grandparents too, I have like a weird connection with the body after dying. I feel like it should still be really cared for, and so I feel like that was my first time really experiencing that, and I don't know.
Yeah. So were you, I don't want to say prepared, but did anyone talk to you about like what to expect? Like, you're going to go, it's an open casket. Here's what it might look like. Was there anybody who shared any of that with you?
I think we weren't sure if it was going to be an open casket or not because of the fact that it was a car accident. And obviously, in a lot of cases, they can't do that. So I'm not sure if they did talk to us about that. I think everyone was unsure of what it was going to be. I knew that there was going to be a lot of different emotions. With younger kids, they can't hide it or they don't know how to express it. So there were a lot of people that were from the studio that were really emotional, which I knew that I wasn't the closest person there with her. I wasn't her family. So I wouldn't have wanted to make a scene in that way, but I also can't dox anyone for how they grieve or how they were grieving. So it was interesting to see that because there were a lot of people who were handling it in different ways.
Do you feel like you held your grief in?
Yes.
Okay. So in hindsight, do you think that was okay, or?
I think I probably should have talked to someone about it sooner. I remember someone, I still don't know to this day who, reached out to the school, like my high school, about it happening. And I was kind of blindsided by a guidance counselor asking me about it. And I was mad when she asked about it, honestly, because I was like, how did you know that happened to me? And who revealed this to you? So I was kind of struggling in silence, and I didn't want to help.
Realize that. Okay. Yeah. And I I don't know, but I wonder, like, we've connected on that with you had heard, I guess, I think from my podcast, the first season, like I lost one of my closest friends when we were
Hmm.
going into 8th grade in the summer too. And same thing, like one, you don't expect that. You're not thinking of that. And, this is way back when, I feel like in the dinosaur age, but nobody talked about it. I really don't remember if anyone shared, like, hey, this is what to expect, but it was something that definitely stayed with me for many, 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 many years. Like it was really hard. And when we went back to school in the fall, it was like nothing. Like nobody said anything.
Hmm.
So it's different how different people handle it, and we have to respect that.
Hmm.
And I think in our society, it's really hard because I don't think a lot of people want to talk about it. So then they don't know how to approach it,
Yeah.
and that had to be pretty shocking for you to be like, why is this person into my business and how do they
Yeah,
know about it?
exactly. Because I maybe was trying to hide that I was grieving. So I was like, how did she know? Like, but I
Yeah.
still don't know to this day who reached out to the school, but I didn't accept any counseling.
I was just going to ask that. I was going to say, well, did you do any follow-ups or anything? Okay.
Mm-mm.
That's okay. All
And
right.
looking back, I probably could have used it. So
Yeah.
I will say
And
that.
I was going to, when we'll start talking about your grandparents now, and like that loss early on definitely impacts, later on how we cope and how we express our emotions. And so kind of lead into your grandparents, I had said earlier, like they hold a unique place in our lives. And, you know, some people, not all people, have a special bond with their grandparents. And
Hmm.
so tell us about your relationship with your grandparents and what made it special to
Yeah.
you.
I was very lucky to be so close to my grandparents. I'm close to both sets of grandparents, but especially my dad's side. They lived only a 5-minute, 10-minute walk from our house, and I was the youngest of 12 grandchildren. So I'm the youngest
Oh my
child and
gosh.
I'm the youngest grandchild. So I feel like I probably got some special treatment.
The baby. You're the
Yes.
baby.
Yeah. So I feel like my grandmom really felt like I was her baby. She took me as like another
Mm.
opportunity to be a mom. She watched
Oh.
me when I was younger, took me to preschool, had so many stories about that. And I have journals from her where she would write that I would tell her that she was my best friend and we just were so close. And I felt the same with my grandpa too. They really were like a second set of parents, really.
Wow. That is special. That's really
Hmm.
unique. And that's for the listeners. That's kind of how I, connected with you, seeing some of your stories about your grandparents, about your grandmom and that special bond. And it just so happened somebody in a counseling session was talking about that. Like their grandparents one of them was sick and they had a really special bond, and you popped in my head. And I was just thinking, like, yeah, it is, and how important it is you know to nurture that bond and to keep that, because I think as some kids get older, they're like, oh, too cool or whatever for that, but you really had this really close bond with them, and that's beautiful that you
Yeah.
had that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think my dad is lucky too because his two sisters both live out of state, but they had equal effort into seeing all three of their kids, all of their grandchildren till the time that they passed. So it kind of set the tone for me that when I'm older, I'm still going to have my parents there as support because I feel like they're similar to my grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. They had to make effort. It's
Hmm.
not just you making effort. They made the effort, and they poured into you, loving you and nurturing you and spending that quality time. And I know you felt it, and you
Hmm.
made you feel important.
It
Yeah.
really did.
Yeah. And So they lived real close in, I guess, the same neighborhood. You
Mhm.
spent a lot. Did you spend a lot of time with them, like weekends or
Yeah,
being the youngest?
yeah, we were always over there for sleepovers, or they would watch us. They would take me out to lunches as I got into like teenager years. They would take me out to lunch or take my brother and I out to lunches. And I would still sleep over their house. And even when my grandma was in the nursing home, I would sleep over at the nursing home.
Did you really?
We were just a pair. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
So that's amazing that they let you do that.
Yeah. She needed someone there, so I was really happy to be there with her.
Oh, that's really
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So losing both of your grandparents in like it was 13 months, correct?
Yes.
That must have been incredibly difficult because it's such a short, close amount of time. And with that close relationship that you had, can you tell us about that time and like what was going on? Like, were they sick? What was going on?
Yeah. So my grandpa basically was really sharp mentally, but he had a lot of heart issues. He was struggling to get around as he got older. They both passed when they were 86, but they're 1 year apart from one another. So as he was getting into his mid to late 80s, he really started slowing down, and we knew that something was going wrong with his heart. So for
Mhm.
about a few months leading up to his passing, we kind of knew it was coming. And during that time, my grandma started experiencing Alzheimer's. So she was mentally failing while he was physically failing. So they were kind of holding each other together in certain ways. She was getting him around, but he was telling her where to go. So um they my grandpa ended up passing away in April from heart failure at home. We knew it was happening, so we got to be there with him. And my grandmom, once that happened, really declined mentally.
Yeah.
She had her person they were married for over 60 years. So um, she really just needed him to survive, honestly. He passed in April, and it was hard for her to be alone at the house. So I started spending a lot more time there. We tried having some family friends be caregivers, but she didn't really want to feel like she was being taken care of. I think that's why she appreciated when I was there or another cousin or someone closer was there, because it didn't feel like I was taking care of her. It felt like I was spending time with her and hanging out with her.
Yeah.
So we did that for a while, and she ended up moving into a nursing home close by the following March. So almost a year after my grandpa passed away, she moved into a nursing home, which was just necessary because she had been walking out of the house, and she knew where she was going. She would end up at church at the time church started, but she didn't remember that we were supposed to be picking her up for dinner. So then we get to the house and she's not there. Thankfully, we kind of knew her usual spots, so nothing bad ever happened to her, but that can be a dangerous situation. And especially working at a nursing home, I experienced that, or other people that have Alzheimer's, dementia, other sorts of things. So she wasn't too happy about the nursing home at first, as a lot of people are, because she felt a little uprooted. But she found friends there, and she always had visitors. I would sleep there, like I said. They didn't have any issue with it. I think that's a normal thing. Maybe not a normal thing, but some family members do stay over. So she always appreciated that. But it was really sad when I would have to go in the mornings, and she would kind of beg me to stay. So we were experiencing some of that there, but she did have friends there that she really enjoyed spending time with. She had one friend, Teresa, and they were always in each other's rooms chatting with each other. And another guy friend, Larry, who was almost, she called him her boyfriend, but it wasn't really her boyfriend, but he really ended up being someone really special, because she moved into the nursing home in March, and she ended up having a massive stroke in May. So only 2 months after moving into the nursing home. And Larry, her boyfriend, I'll call him, noticed that she didn't show up for breakfast, and he was the one who found her in her room. So he was like an angel sent, really, to have found her. But when I found out about that, because she had been declining in the past year, she would always fall. She was clumsy. She had been in and out of short hospital stays for bumping her head or falling before. And I heard that she had fallen. And I kind of thought, and was in the hospital, and I kind of brushed it off, like, okay, we'll hopefully get her out tomorrow. Like, they'll patch her up, and hopefully it doesn't worsen her memory in any way. And they didn't know what had happened yet, because they just found her in her room on the floor. But then when they realized that her brain activity, I guess, wasn't really there, she wasn't really waking up, they found out that it was a stroke. And I think that was on a Saturday morning that she fell, and she ended up passing on Monday.
That quick.
Yes. So, and she was good up until that time. The night before, she had a 3-way phone call with all of her sisters that were still around, and they were chatting on the phone real late. My cousin had visited her with her the day before. I had slept over 3 days before, and we went out to dinner and media and had wine and dinner, and everything was fine. So that was unexpected, but I almost feel like because of her Alzheimer's, we were grieving her in some way already.
Yeah. And I was going to ask that about the Alzheimer's. So was she in and out, or by the time she got to the nursing home, was she fully like, not really remembering? And
no, she was, to some regular people or strangers, they might not even realize that she had Alzheimer's.
Okay.
If I can compare it to my mom's mom has Alzheimer's. I don't actually know if it's Alzheimer's or dementia, but she doesn't know who we are. It's totally different.
It's different.
My grandmom on my dad's side, she got up every morning, got dressed real nice, always did her makeup and had her red lipstick on. She knew who we were. Yeah, she knew who we were, but her memory was more short term.
Yeah.
Like, she knew who we were, she knew where her house was, her history, but she couldn't tell you what she had for breakfast or that.
So she was definitely in the beginning, the beginning stages of it, and that part is hard. I worked at a nursing home too. I didn't realize you worked at a nursing home as an accountant. That was my first job out of college, and I was a social worker, and so I learned a lot. And seeing the people when they were in that in and out was so painful sometimes for me, because you could tell they would recognize, like, oh yeah, I wasn't supposed to go there, or I wasn't supposed to do that, and that just always like break my heart. And a lot of people didn't have family like your family, like there and being there for her on a regular basis, and that is so nice that she had that. And that transition, you're right, like of course she wasn't happy about it. And working at a nursing home, it's one of the hardest things. Like, sometimes people will go have a decline. It's a whole new environment if they didn't plan that. If they're planning it, it's different. Yeah.
I think it worsened her confusion, really, because she was already confused about not having my grandpapa around, and then to be in this new environment and on a new schedule. She didn't realize that. She knew she was forgetful, but I don't think she realized that she could be a danger to herself in certain ways just by getting lost. Or the nursing home she was in was near her late sister's house, where her brother-in-law still lived. And it was in walking distance, and she ended up getting put on a not allowed to leave list because she kept leaving the nursing home and walking to their house. And
Wow.
she knew where she was going. She could get back and forth safely, but if she would have had a moment of confusion while she was walking and made one wrong turn, that would have been the end of it.
Yeah.
So
It is dangerous. It's scary. And, you know, you're right when you were saying like you were grieving and kind of mourning her while she was still there.
yeah, I was missing the feeling of her taking care of me, because every time I went there, I kind of had to take care of her, report back to how she was doing, and it was nerve-wracking sometimes because it was a big responsibility to take care of this person. And I know how well she took care of me, and she really deserved good care when she's that age, just because she could be frustrating at times because she wouldn't want to listen to certain things or was confused. You really have to work with them in a certain way when they're in that state of mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 24. Okay. 23, 24.
Yeah. So it's not like you have any, I mean, you worked at a nursing home, but it's not like you really had any experience in like what to do. It's all new. And this is somebody you love. And you're right, that was always there to care for you. And now those roles being reversed. And yeah, that'd be pretty stressful. And
yeah.
So how do you think losing them both in such a close time too impacted how you coped with your grief and coping as she's losing her memory? Like how did the closeness of it impact how you were coping and dealing with things?
After losing my grandpa, her and I would hang out and we could talk about him and look at pictures of him, and she would get emotional, but I like to talk about the people. And my dad, for example, I don't think he'll mind me saying this, he's the type, he doesn't want to look at any pictures, he doesn't want to talk about it, nothing. And I'm like, I need to keep talking about this person. So it was nice that her and I would talk about him and go out to his restaurants and talk about him and just get to have the similar grieving experience, I'll say. And then when I found out she was gonna go too in those few days, it was really like, wow, is this really happening again already? Because we thought, just because her mind was declining, it was happening pretty slowly. She could have lived another 10 years, in our opinion. She was in perfect physical condition, besides what we didn't know was going on in her brain. But like I said, she would walk miles, maybe 1 or 2 miles, to someone's house or to church, and she had no issue doing it. So that was kind of like, wow, how did this happen? That was a little bit confusing too. It was almost, I'm glad that because it was a stroke, she did go, because a lot of people, when they come out of a stroke, they're not the same. And I knew she was already going downhill, so in some ways it's almost like I'm thankful that, like I said, she was talking to her sisters the night before. We went out to dinner, had our wine, and there was no suffering, because Alzheimer's can get really ugly. So there was conflicting feelings there, because it was almost like, wow, what just happened? But also, thankfully, it went this way in a way.
And I think with it being so close, like it brings it back up that you didn't, I mean, a year is nothing. 13 months is nothing. We're going to be grieving the rest of our lives. Like, you know, we just grow with it. We'll always miss that person. So I'm sure you're right. You were like, wait, didn't this just happen? That's for your whole family. Like, you're right back into it. And it's interesting you shared about like your dad. And I don't want to say, oh, that's because it's not all males, but a lot of males can fall into that category where they're like, I don't want to talk about, because they do it more in action. Maybe they're letting their grief out in a different way. But the experience that you had with your grandmom and being able to talk and share those memories about your grandfather, and it was very different than when you lost your, and the relationship obviously it's different, but you didn't want to talk when you lost your dance teacher. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
you were kind of like your dad.
Yeah.
And right. And it was very different. Do you think going through a loss earlier and realizing, did you realize anything like, it's important that I talk about this or share memories?
Yeah, I think I did because, like I said, for some reason, because I wasn't my dance teacher's relative or family, I felt like I wasn't allowed to grieve for some reason. And I should still honor our relationship in whatever way I want to. So I felt like when I lost my grandparents, I was allowed to grieve however I wanted to grieve and take as much time as I needed.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm glad you brought that back up, because for the listeners, and I know you know this now, that it doesn't matter who that person is. It's your unique relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be grieving and mourning the way that feels best for you, not because someone's like, oh, that's the way you're supposed to do it. Or,
Mm-hmm.
but I totally understand what you're saying. Like, kind of being like, well, why am I this upset? I shouldn't be crying. There's only room for them to cry. No,
Yeah.
you're all upset, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really appropriate, but that's common. That happens a lot to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is that we don't know. No one's sitting down and saying, you may feel this way, and it's okay if you're crying or
Mm-hmm.
you're angry or you don't want to talk. Nobody tells us anything. It's just kind of, you learn by getting thrown in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with your grandparents now, like, I know you said with your grandmom, and you said it earlier about preparing and a relationship with the body, and you had mentioned like you were the one who did certain things. Can you share about that? Because that's really unique. For you were 24, you said?
Yeah, 23, 24 when I
Yeah.
lost each of them. Even my grandpop, I'll just say a little bit about that. He always called me his hairdresser because I would always comb his hair. And the night that he was home and we knew they were administering morphine, so we knew that that night was going to be the night that it was happening, I combed his hair, made sure it looked right, even though he didn't look like himself. When you're in heart failure, you really bloat, and he didn't look like him, but I still made sure he would have felt like he was being taken care of. And same thing with my grandmom. As soon as I was in the hospital when she took her last breath, and as soon as they kind of removed all the tubes, whatever they do, I did the same thing, make sure her hair's okay. I grabbed towels and cleaned her face. I laid in bed with her for a while. I just feel like there's something to the physical, even though I don't think that there's anything left inside after that moment. I just think that we should still care for it in a way.
Yeah. It was just, that's your instinct, and that is, what felt right to you, and that nurturing part,
Mm-hmm.
that the woman who nurtured you and took care of you in many ways, like from a baby,
Mm-hmm.
you instinctively, and with your grandfather, like combing his hair. Was
Yeah.
there anybody during that time that was like, what are you doing? Or like giving you a look, anything? Or
My parents were there with me when my grandmom passed. I don't think they minded. I don't think that
okay.
they would have done that themselves
Yeah.
necessarily, but both my grandparents were really physically affectionate. Like, we would always hug and kiss goodbye. My grandpop was known for giving like massages and foot rubs, and my grandmom would always rub my back to sleep. We were just very
Oh.
physically affectionate. And so I don't think they thought it was strange.
Yeah.
No.
So it was so natural, because
Yeah.
yeah. And you also shared with me that you were the one who like picked out her clothes for the funeral.
Yeah. So, because I was spending a lot of time with her during the last year, I was really probably the closest one with her. And when I think about it, I mentioned in her journals that when I was younger, I would tell her she was my best friend. And anytime I would went to visit her in her last year of life, she would always tell me, "You're my best friend. I'm so thankful for you. We're so close." And I think my family saw that. They knew that we had a really special connection, and I really knew, I think, how she would have wanted to be presented because I was around her a lot. So I got to pick out her outfit, and I knew where everything was at the nursing home because I spent a lot of time there, so I knew where to find stuff. So I picked out a nice dress for her, and her and my grandpa were known for going down to Boscov's and going shopping down in Delaware and buying things multiple times.
Oh.
They wouldn't remember that they had already bought it, so she had this set of costume jewelry, the same set, 2 versions. So I picked that for her to wear, and I wore the second set to the funeral.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's nice. You
so
still
we
have the set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have it. Both sets. I think I still have both versions.
Okay.
So we kind of got to match in that way, and I didn't realize how specific it got. I had to give them her makeup, give them nail polish. So I was really thinking hard, okay, when she got her nails done, what colors would she like? Like thinking about the little details like that she would have wanted. And I'm grateful that I knew the answers because I think that took pressure off of my dad and his sisters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And was it strange for you? I mean, you didn't have to go out and buy, but you are in her room and you're picking it out. Did it feel strange at all? Or was it kind of you just knew her and you knew this is what she would want?
I think it was strange because I didn't want anyone else to have thought differently or thought. I think I chose 2 different dresses, and I kind of was like, what if they would have preferred this one? Like my girl cousins or my 2 aunts, because they were close with her and they would go shopping together, or they knew her in that way also. But when I told them, like, this is what I picked out, but if you don't like it, we can totally change it. But I think they were very like, no, this is perfect. This is definitely what she wanted.
Yeah.
They trusted me in that, and they really acknowledged, I guess, that it was good. So
Yeah. And it's interesting just because it's so unique. You would think like, somebody older would be doing that, but you took that on and you took it very personally too. You wanted to make sure that you honored her in every step. And I have to say a shout to the funeral home because usually they'll just do their own makeup. So that's pretty neat that they were like, hey, what would she like? Do you have it?
Mm-hmm. And I gave them notes. I was pretty specific, and
Oh, I'm sure you did.
I was testing lipstick swatches to make sure it was the right red and
Oh my.
all that. So I actually would have changed her hair a little bit from how they did it, but I was pretty happy with the result.
That's good. That's
Yes.
good. And that's, you went to 2 funerals now before that, but that can be pretty shocking when you go because sometimes, obviously they might not look the same, but sometimes they don't look at all like I don't know. I feel like it is the Undertaker. Like they just didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
So, that's good that you were able to make sure that she looked and in what she wore and her makeup and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I still felt like it was her there. So.
Yeah.
And with my grandpa too. My grandpa, since he knew he was declining, he actually set up all his funeral preparations himself. When my dad asked him, what do we need to do if something happens, he said, you just call this guy and everything's already handled and paid for. So
Wow.
I think that taught my dad something, that he doesn't want to leave us with any burden either.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So was this stuff beside like you're picking that out, was that taken care of for your grandma as well?
certain things. Well, we knew my grandpa went into a military cemetery, so we knew where she would be going already, what funeral home, their church. My best friend's family owns a flower shop, so they did the flowers for both. So a lot of it was already handled, and it was interesting because, like I said, because it was so short between passings, when my grandmom passed, it was like everyone went into autopilot, like, these are the calls we need to make, this is who we need to let know this happened, we've just done this. Like,
Yeah.
it was kind of strange.
Yeah, that is strange when it's that close, and then you just kind of go into autopilot and do what you need to do, and everyone knows what they need to do. But there are sometimes some people just collapse and they can't. And that's just where they're at. Yeah. So for you, how long's it been since you've lost both of them? 3 years? 2?
It's been 2 years since my grandpop, and this May was 1 year for my grandma.
So it's still, it's still very, very fresh. And I think, do you see that, like, you're continuing to feel a certain, like, you're still grieving, or there's times that, like, maybe it just hits? And
for sure, it definitely comes up randomly. I think that happens for a lot of people. Something silly will set it off. Like, I think you saw my TikTok I posted last week. I have a lot of my grandmom's jewelry, and some of her hair was stuck in her necklace.
Oh yeah, I did.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a piece of her. Like, I can feel her again in a weird way. I know that's probably sounds creepy, but I'm connected to physical things in that way. So it just will come up randomly. I might drive past their street and think about a lot of memories I had there, or just anything can make it. Any memory can come up.
Did it make you, with the hair, did it make you cry, or it was just like, oh, like, shocking?
It didn't make me cry. It was just shocking, and then, of course, just made me start thinking about her. Because there's certain things of her that are in my room or that I wear every day, so they're a constant reminder. And then when I saw that, that was like a new reminder. And I know certain things were hard at the beginning, like the first time I washed certain pieces of her clothes, and I realized that they didn't have her smell anymore.
Yep.
That was very emotional for me. I had a breakdown when that happened. But I have to understand that it's not going to last forever. So I just have to keep reminding myself that.
Yep. You'll just kind of got to ride the wave, and eventually it settles down. And I'm curious with, I hear how you're honoring your grandmom and how you're remembering her. You have things around, you wear things. Is there other ways that you honor your grandparents and remember them? You talk about it. I know, I see your videos. And you're like me. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to share. And how else do you find keeping their memory alive and honoring them?
I think as a family, we do a lot of things together because family was so important to them. Like, they had friends outside of the family, but they would drop anything for any of us. Or if we had asked to hang out and they already had plans, they probably would have canceled with their friends to be with their family rather.
Oh, wow.
So I think just keeping our family connection strong, with all my siblings, and doing things that we would have done with them. This weekend, for example, on Sunday, we're going crabbing down the shore, which is something that my grandpa would always take us to go do. So now that's something that my dad is sharing with my nieces and nephews. So I think just keeping traditions alive, making recipes that she would make. My grandmom always made these spritz cookies. They're in like a cookie gun or a cookie press where you can put different shapes on the end. We would always make those together. So make those at the holidays because that's a special recipe that she had. So keeping traditions alive, really.
I didn't ask this in the beginning, and I'm sorry, I should have. What did you call them? Did you call them grandmom, grandpop?
Yeah, just gram and pop.
Okay.
Grandmom, grandpop.
All right. You didn't say anything different, but then I just realized, I'm like, you call them anything different? Okay. So you said something just, just then too, how family oriented they were and how important it was. It's like, especially grandparents, they serve as this anchor in families.
Hmm.
How did that loss of your grandparents like impact your family as a whole? Did it bring you closer together? Did it, did it change at all? Or you just continue to grow?
I would say within my siblings and my immediate household, it definitely brought us closer together. Just with being able to share different emotions that we hadn't shared together before and being vulnerable in different ways with each other, seeing how each other grieve and sharing their memories together. Like I said, we want to keep doing their traditions together. And I think a lot of us are like putting more effort into that, even if we're not saying that. I think we're probably all thinking about them when we're doing these certain things. But with cousins wise, like my dad's aunts and stuff, I won't really get into that. But obviously, that can be just because they're in different states. We would really do things together a lot if it was involving my grandparents. So I guess that's something for them. It's their responsibility now to keep their connections together rather than going through my grandparents.
Yeah. So that part has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I did hear, that's why I asked that. I did hear you saying like your dad kind of took on some roles in like keeping those traditions and keeping the memory without saying we're doing this because and
Mm-hmm.
it definitely sounded like as a family you guys interacted differently and like realize how important like these relationships are and
Mm-hmm.
to talk about things and not take them for granted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely not taking things for granted and understanding the impact that our grandparents made on us and that our
Yeah.
parents are making on us. So,
Yeah. And because they it's a connection to our history and traditions, and it definitely sounds like it's influenced you as a person
mm-hmm.
and how you connect to others in your own sense of identity with family and the legacy that they have, you know. So,
Definitely.
yeah. What are some of your like favorite or cherished memories with each of them?
Um, well, with my grandmom, I would say when we were younger, she would, like I said, she treated me like I was her baby. She sent me home with my first set of bangs, which I don't know if my mom was too happy about. Um, she wasn't afraid to, neither of them were afraid to discipline us like our parents were. So it would kind of be funny where to see my grandpa act tough sometimes and him saying like, oh, we're gonna take you to the hospital if you start crying, like no need for that, like to see him being a little tough with us. But with my grandmom, definitely going out to dinners, and especially after my grandpa passed, we got even more close. Like I said, we spent so much time together. um we would just have little wine nights and talk about everything. It was like we were girlfriends. And she would always say that she didn't feel like she was in her 80s, and she didn't act like it or seem like it. She kind of would talk about her boyfriend. She would ask me about boys. We would go shopping together, have our wine, and just could have fun together. And my grandpa, um, I think just, I don't even, just his presence. We would always go over there for card games. We would play rummy together a lot. So a lot of nights of doing that together and sleeping over, and he would always let me sleep in his spot, and he would sleep in like the little twin bed that they had for when the grandkids came over. So that would be funny because he would be like, keep my spot warm. Or even when he was in the hospital before he passed, I was staying with my grandmom, and I went to visit him, and he said like, oh, I heard you're keeping my spot warm, like you better be taking care of
Oh,
grandmom. So he was so sweet. Really, he's one of the
yeah.
best men
Oh,
really I've ever known.
yeah. Definitely a very good role model. And you guys are blessed to have, you have grandparents like that and your dad had parents like that. Like, I know,
Hmm.
there's not, there's a lot of families that don't have that.
Yes.
So that's so important. And kind of talking about other families, you being in your 20s, many people in their 20s, and you were even younger, like when you experienced your first loss, but most people in their 20s are not even thinking about loss or death.
Mm-hmm.
So how did losing your grandparents and losing your dance teacher and a friend early in life kind of change your perspective on the future and mortality?
I think it just really put into perspective that everything is impermanent, which is also a yoga theme, I'll say, and recognizing that anything that's in front of you isn't going to be here forever. And there's beauty in that and also sadness in that. But if you can take the time to appreciate the person even more in the moment, then I think you can feel them carried with you more afterwards because you know how to kind of live with their intention also in you. So I definitely don't think a lot of my friends think about death and that type of stuff as much as I do. I think it's something that's on my mind every day, honestly, and not in a bad way. It's just something that's always there. And thinking about, I never know when I will be going. So I want to be making sure I'm living in a way and doing things that I'm happy with because everything's impermanent. So,
yeah, you definitely have a unique perspective on life and death
mm-hmm.
than most people your age. And I always say, like, it's so interesting in our society that we all know we're going to die sometime, but yet
Mm-hmm.
it is one of these topics that everybody or majority of people are very uncomfortable talking about, and the emotions that come with that. It doesn't make sense. And you're kind of like me. I feel like we talk about it way too much in our household. And maybe one day I'll put it on TikTok, but I have a video because I started writing out like funeral songs and like Bible verses that I once said.
Yeah.
And like one of them, and I've been saying this since the song came out in like, I guess it was like maybe 89 or 90, like Bon Jovi's song, Never Say Goodbye, has to be played at my funeral. Like I tell everybody, I know, I'm like, in case you come to my funeral, you don't hear it, you better pull it up. But like, I have that and I'm like, I have to finish it because I want it taken care of because I don't want to put that on other people as well. But having a lot of loss young, I was in my 20s, and most people not understanding that. How did it impact you? Like, have your friends in like have they been supportive? Do they talk about it, or do they just act like everything's, oh, let's go out? And
I think that around when it happened, my close friends were really supportive. I don't have a big group of friends. I have 3 friends, really. And they were all supportive in a way that, yeah, if you want to go out, do something, but more let me know what you need, which I think was really helpful. Like, I can't express that I know how you feel, but I'm here for you. So, yeah, I think that they were good in that way. I don't really remember in the days following if I really went out or did anything. With my grandmom, I think at that point I had more of the idea of impermanence, and maybe that's why I'm comfortable too with how she went, because like I said, I wouldn't have wanted her to suffer, so I knew she was going to pass in some way at some time, so I'm glad that she was happy the days leading into it.
yeah.
So I think maybe at that point I just kind of knew I had to keep going.
Yeah. And having a close support group, it sounds like they were very understanding and kind of like meeting you where you were at. No expectations and like you should do this, or, oh, I know exactly how you feel. Like none of that. Well, that's good.
No. Yeah, thankfully there was none of that. And my
Yeah.
work was very understanding. I was very close with am very close with my coworkers, and they were all understanding of take as much time off as you need, and also when you come back, it's not in your face about, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Like, I think people really respected my space, which was nice.
Okay. Well, that's good. And then, so how did you besides talking, doing videos, how else did you express your grief? How else do you express your grief, I should say?
I cry a lot. I'll
Okay.
say that. I just cry and think about them. I look at pictures of them and cry. And if I feel like I need to let out that emotion, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
So sometimes I just need to go down memory lane. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
people are really avoidant of that, but I feel like I need that sometimes to just feel that connection, and go back to those memories.
Yeah.
So.
I just shared, and I couldn't believe how beneficial that was for me 30 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could encourage you, definitely, if you're not writing this down, like you had said, like your grandmom's journal, like have a journal, put this down, because truthfully, you think you'll remember and you might not remember. We forget so much, and you might not remember the small details. Like doing what I did a month ago was, I felt really good doing it. I couldn't believe how I wasn't like a basket case mess, but it was helpful, but it was hard because I didn't write things down and I didn't remember a lot of details.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have a journal? Do you write that stuff down?
I don't, but I feel like I should.
You should. I should send you my workbook and you put it all in there, because this is all that stuff to remember. And that's stuff that I did with people in here in the office, because it helps with the grief process. But then there's a spot, and if you want to go back, you'll remember. And you just have so many. I like how you're doing your videos. That's another great way. You don't have to write it down. If you're doing videos of it, it's sharing, and you're capturing it that way. And the one that really sticks out is like you had the one, you guys were taking a walk, and it was a while ago. I think you put it up, and it was the cutest. I think I might have cried. I cry over everything, but it was so touching, and you could just see the connection that you two had. And I think it had to with, you're my best friend. Do you know that?
With my grandma?
Yes.
That was 3 days before she had her stroke. It was our
No.
last dinner, and we went out to the townhouse in Media, which she had been to before. I knew she liked that. We both had a glass of red wine, and I remember what we had to eat even, and we were walking back to the car, and I did a little play on the Mean Girls quote, "I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom." And I said, "She's not a regular grandmom," and she said, "You're right, I'm not a regular grandmom."
That is it.
And she was just so cute, and I'm so happy I took that video, because that was the last night I got to spend with her, and I never would have expected that in a million years because of how well she seemed.
Yeah. I didn't realize that was only a few days before, and you're right. Like, so glad you took that video and like had that moment. Like, and
Yeah.
that's one thing I see with you, is that you realize at some point, like, life is fragile. Don't take it for granted, and not like, oh, I'll come visit you later, grandma. I have this to do. Like, you really cherish that relationship, and you put that time in.
Yeah, I think losing my grandpa, and even though I thought we were going to have my grandmom for a lot longer than we did, I knew that I wanted to put a lot of energy into our relationship from that time on, because these were the last few years I was going to have with her, and I'm never going to get that back. So
I say that, and I hope you keep that, like, as you get older and with work. So many people say like, oh, I'll go do that, like even when they know the person is sick. And now I know, because I've been through it quite a few times. Like, I'm pretty honest if I'm close enough to them, and I'll ask, like, can I just give you my 2 cents? Because I think it's so important. Like, your work will wait, going and doing this will wait. Like, go take that time and enjoy it. And that's
yeah.
what it seems like, you were able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you had shared about the yoga part and recognizing how life is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
can you share more about that with the yoga background, and how you developed a new way of looking at people and things in life?
Yeah, that is I don't even know necessarily if that's a whole yoga theme, but specifically one monk that I listen to a lot. He's passed away now too, but Thich Nhat Hanh is his name. And that's impermanence is one of his big themes, and recognizing that and knowing how to grieve. I have a book from him called No Death, No Fear, because he talks about how there isn't really a birth and a death. Our spirit was already alive in our ancestors, and our ancestors' spirits are going to be alive in us. So there's kind of a never ending realm to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And with the physical practice, I try to keep that in my mind, but with the physical practice, I love that yoga doesn't have any expectations. I can show up to my mat and do whatever. I don't have to come out of the class feeling better than I did going in. That's not really the point. It's more to be aware of where you're at in that moment so that you can move forward better.
Yeah. Do you find yoga to be helpful for people that might be going through the grieving process and are looking for ways to kind of like have an outlet or, just move their body?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I know grief can put you kind of into a sedentary time too. You might not want to do anything. And like I said, yoga doesn't have to be a power yoga flow where you're doing all these hard poses. There's specific grief yoga and restorative yoga where you're just accepted to be in this space. You might not even move the whole time, but just getting yourself onto a mat or out of your house can be helpful. I always say at the end of my classes, I talk about humility and how yoga is so humbling, because the hardest part is sometimes just getting there. It's hard to just show up for yourself and to want to get out there. So I think that yoga can be helpful in that way. And like I said, you don't have to come out feeling better. You can go in grieving and come out grieving. But it's knowing what you're feeling and taking the time to feel that and to understand what you're feeling.
I like that. That's really, really, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense. And I know like yoga's really hard for me, like mentally hard, because I'm always like, but I recommend it to everybody that comes in here. Most of the time I'm like, you need to do yoga. And I do it. And I love the more that I do it. And I'm hearing what, like you were saying, when I'm hearing the person that's doing the class, the things that they're saying, they're all things that I'm trying to teach people in counseling. And once you start to, like, for me, the awareness of that connection, and then even some of the poses are amazing for releasing anxiety and calming your body. And I find it I think yoga is a really, really good thing for people to do, even if it's like 10 minutes. I think for some people, maybe like myself, it's that just show up. You didn't have to be a pro. You didn't have to like know how to do all those poses. And I like that teachers will say that, or instructors will say it, like, just show up, just do it. It's not a competition.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Just come as you are. I always tell people, you don't even have to do what I'm saying. If you just need to be in a space where you're accepted and held here, then do whatever you need to do, and I'll just be a guide if you need. So I am very happy I found the practice, because I think definitely during college I experienced a lot of anxiety, as a lot of people do when they're going through that change, moving out of home for the first time and just kind of growing up a bit. And yoga is so grounding and can just take you back down a level sometimes for me.
Have you used the yoga when you were in a space of like an emotional place? Like, you're feeling really emotional or really sad or anxious. Do you use it then?
Definitely. Like I said, sometimes it's hard to get yourself out of that space, but another thing in yoga is you can have whatever emotions you want to have. Yoga doesn't say don't be angry. It's saying feel the anger, acknowledge it, and let it go. Don't act on it. So I think that when I'm feeling anxious, it just can be there for me. or sad. Like I said, there's a lot of grounding poses, and if I'm not feeling too energetic, I can just lay on my back, put my legs up in the air, and it kind of, that's like legs up the wall pose, just kind of brings the blood back to my heart, and I just get to lay there and relax.
It's another one for anxiety. I'll tell people to do, because a lot of people with anxiety have tight psoas muscles. So that one, a couple other poses are really helping with that. So, and that's something that maybe you and I could connect on outside of this. I would love to be connecting with someone to offer like trauma or grief yoga, whether it's, 1 session, 2 sessions, because I find it so important. And there's not a lot of people who pull them together, at least in our area. And that's why I was curious for you, like what you noticed when you are emotional, and has it been helpful? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily anyone that has come to my class for that, but I even know last week one of my students, her neighbor had just moved away. And that morning was right before she came to class. She said goodbye of her neighbor of 20 plus years, I want to say. They had been neighbors. They watch each other's dogs. And she came to class very emotional. And like I said before, I didn't want her to stop being emotional. Just feel it. Do what you can do. We're happy you even showed up. So
I'm thinking about Jess at 17. I got to pull it all together, with us. And now, like, that growth that you've had and being able to share that with others, of like, just show up. It's okay. Whatever you're feeling, you're allowed. It's just, honoring them where they're at. It's a social work saying, just meet the client where they're at. And that's what you're telling me you do in yoga, but it sounds like that's something that you've learned and adopted in your life.
Yeah, I've definitely accepted my own feelings a lot more as I've gotten older, and known that I'm allowed to feel how I want to feel. And like I said, you just can't let it take over. There's a way to acknowledge, I think, any feeling, acknowledging anger, acknowledging your sadness, and just knowing how to go forward with that.
Yeah. Is there any advice that you would give to people that are in their 20s that might be going through loss or similar situation like yourself, or going through grief for the first time? Is there any advice that you would give them?
I would say, like, I had to learn just being open about what you're feeling, and that whatever you're feeling about the grief is okay. Because you could feel angry if someone passes in a certain way, or shocked, or anything, and you're allowed to feel however it comes on to you, because your relationship with that person is only yours. And like I said with my grandmom, not that there was relief at all with her passing. It was one of the worst things I've gone through, but knowing that she went in the way she did, and accepting that we had our relationship, and I can just be happy for the memories that I had. And yeah.
And no one can take that from you. That's your own unique relationship. Yeah. And for you, someone who's young, experiencing this significant losses in such a short time, is there a message of hope that you would hope that the listeners take away from this?
I would just say that life is really special, and I think the people that I lost all knew that. And I think that they all really were excited about life, and they all had a big passion for certain things, whether it was being with their family, or like my dance teacher was so passionate about what she did, being a dance teacher and being a role model. She really, I think, loved being that type of person. And knowing that after you lose someone, you can take their passion and turn it into a passion of your own, and know that you might be making a difference for someone else by showing that, you still want to be here and show up.
I love that. So you're continuing their legacy, you're honoring them in remembering them, but also kind of like continuing maybe what they liked or what they did, um, within your unique way.
Yeah. And taking that as an opportunity to honor them.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. I think, and what you said about the monk, I forgot his name, but how we live on, right? And that's what reminds me of that. Like when you were saying that, that's kind of what kind of went in my head. And when I don't say it like a monk would say it, but like as long as we are continuing to remember these memories, we're, going crabbing or we're making those cookies and we are talking about them and, maybe wearing some of their stuff, they are still with us. They're continuing to be with us, and they will always be with us as long as we speak their name, we do these things. They're there. They're not gone.
Yeah, exactly. Even it can be so sad to lose them, but like I said, it can be a chance to appreciate the things that maybe you didn't appreciate about them while they weren't here. So.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. That's a perfect message, and hopefully people really could hear that and understand that and embrace that. Embrace kind of what you've learned from this process and what you're continuing. And the one last question I have is like, how do you see yourself continuing to grow and heal from the experiences that you've been through?
I definitely want to continue growing as a yoga teacher. In a way, I feel like I'm honoring my dance teacher by sharing some sort of physical movement and kind of teaching people in that way. And she was also an accountant on the side too, so that's a funny connection that we have too.
Wow.
So I definitely want to continue doing that, and just as I'm single now with no family of my own, but as I have a family of my own, I can't wait to tell my kids about my grandparents and all of the memories that I did with them and share things that they did with me.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Love it. So I really thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing with the listeners about your losses. But what is amazing and what I really have been touched by, not just today, but in hearing your story before, is how you are honoring and how you are continuing their legacy. And probably most important, how you're not taking life for granted, and nor did you. It wasn't like you realize that and how special these people are in your life, and you are going to make sure that they know, and you're going to take every opportunity to share that with them and share your time. And that's beautiful. It really is. And that's a unique characteristic that I hope that you have, and it's so special.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any last thing you would like to say to anybody? Like anything that, you think that they might need to hear?
I'll just say that someone out there thinks you're really special and loves you, whether you don't even know it yet. And there is a home and a group for everyone out there. So.
Awesome. That's great. Now, if people wanted to get in touch with you or connect with you, how could they do that? Or could they do that? I should ask your permission first.
Yes. My Instagram page is at yoga.jessi, Jessi. And my TikTok is kind of the opposite of that. Jessi, Jessi.yogi, Yogi.
Okay. And we'll have that in the show notes. We'll have your, what do they call them? Handles?
Yeah, handles.
There we go.
Socials.
Yes. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing your story. And, I think so many young people will get a lot out of this because it's something that people just aren't talking about and don't know how to navigate. So thank you for showing up. And what do you say, for showing up on your mat today? But thank you for showing up here. And I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Loved being here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Mending Piece by Piece podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, and share with family and friends. See you in 2 weeks. And until next time, continue mending piece by piece. healing through grief one step at a time.